make sure that's away from your face. Like, why? And then they told me, I'm like, oh, well, I cheated death 2 or 3 times on that one. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Podcast US. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat about all the interesting stuff in the world of shooting. And we're going to touch on that today in just a moment. Of course, I'm Brent Wheat, your affable host, and I'm joined by Roy Huntington, my affable co-host. So, Roy, a fun topic you suggested today. We're going to talk about air rifles and their uses, and a little teaser at the end of the episode. We're going to talk about some comments we've gotten recently, and those are kind of fun. So we thought we'd throw that in at the end. But first, we'll get started with, well, we've talked about air guns, Roy. I've got a BB gun, and that's all we need to know, right? I got a BB gun. No, you're chest deep into this particular swamp. So let's talk about air guns, air power, and how it can make you a better shooter. So, Roy, I've set the stage. I slow pitch to you. Now it's up to you.
Slow pitch. That's a good one. I haven't heard that in a long time. Well, I got my first Daisy air gun when I was 5 years old. And I haven't not had 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 ever since then. So,
yeah.
But what we're talking about today isn't really about Daisy air rifles, although they're a lot of fun. You should have one, and we can talk about why. But I think people, especially in today's urban environment, I hear a lot of people that are like your comments on our videos. The only way they can shoot is to go to an indoor range, period. And it's expensive and it's time consuming. And like I had one guy tell me that when I go to my indoor range, I have to call ahead several days in advance, make a reservation. I hadn't even really thought about that before because we used to just show up, right?
Yeah.
But they're so busy, you have to make a reservation. And if you show up late, you've lost your reservation. A lot of them, you have to use their targets, their ammunition, and I found out something the other day too, that there are a lot of them that won't allow solo shooters.
Oh, really?
You have to come,
That's a new
you
one.
have to come with a partner. Yeah, it's because it's this stuff.
Really?
I know. I didn't even think about that. But
Wow.
and I read that on some websites too. So maybe, so that's just a bag full of stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let me interrupt that, as you were talking, it never really struck me, but when I'm face to face, person to person, talking to people, and they find out what I do, and if they're not an avid shooter, they'll always say about the same thing. I've got a gun, I haven't fired in a long time, or my granddad left me a gun, I'd like to go shoot it. And they always ask the same thing, where do I shoot? And for example, around here, well, you're going to get on the road and drive an hour to a public outdoor range. I always say if you got someplace out, your next door neighbor's uncle's farm, and you can do it safely, that's going to be your best bet. But it's really challenging, and it really strikes me when people say that, because here are people that aren't regular shooters. I always want to say active shooter, and that's not a word we want to use anymore.
It's a bad.
They're not shooting hobbyists, but they're interested and they want to go do it, and they're stopped cold because they don't know where they can go. And I, as the local expert, I don't have any answers for them other than, well, there's one way down south and back west, and drive on east, and the look in their eye just tells you, well, they're not going to do it. They're not that involved in the hobby that they're going to get on the road an hour each direction just to go do something they don't even understand yet. So anyway, that is a big deal.
Well, and all the more to add to the fuel to the fire is how complicated it is to go to an indoor range. And if you really are a novice shooter, it's like, gee, here's my first gun I ever bought. And now you show up. First, kudos to you for even walking in the door. Yeah. And and hopefully whoever's behind the counter is going to be positive, or is going to have this situation before. They're going to walk you through it. They're, but you and I both know that's not always the case. And so they show up, they don't have the right equipment, they don't have the right gun, they don't have the right ammo, they have no idea what to do. And so it's terribly, it's mortifying. We hear it all the time. So that's why I wanted to remind people that there are air guns out there. And the beautiful thing about air guns is, unless you live in probably, I don't know, New York City or something, you can pretty much own an air gun regardless of where you live. And now, yes, there are some urban areas that don't allow you to discharge an air gun, within the city limits and stuff like that. And that's fine. But maybe you have a basement, maybe you have a garage, and so you can target practice there. But the beauty of this is you can go to your local box store and you can buy a Crosman or a Daisy or a Umarex or a Gammo or something like that, a pistol or a simple rifle. And you're talking anywhere from $35 to $100. I mean, $100 will get you a lot of air rifle for a novice to begin. And so then you buy some pellets, and if you don't have some eye protection, buy a $3 pair of eye protection, right? Come home, get a cardboard box, fill it up with old newspapers or whatever you have laying around like that, set it up in your garage in a safe corner, and learn how to shoot your gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a million YouTube videos of people doing it,
Exactly. I almost said, and stuff it full of phone books. Oh, wait.
I
know. Another thing from our youth that has completely gone away, but
that's what we would have used. Yeah,
exactly. Well, the beauty of it is that, first of all, the range is reduced. You can get good training out of a decent air rifle at, 30 feet, or even 15 feet if you're really space limited. So it's not like you need a 50-yard range or even a 25-yard range. They're lower powered weapons. So to keep those good, tight, consistent groups, virtually any backyard would be a good shooting range. And I'm a perfect example of that. In my city, anything that projects a projectile is a violation. It's a infraction. So technically, I can't say that I would shoot a air rifle in my backyard, but since I have a 6-foot privacy fence all the way around it, and there's really no report, I could probably get away with it if I chose to get away with it. So there's just one example.
Well, this is the downside of this to me is the fact that you're on your own. And so you don't take the local air rifle safety class, although such things do exist like that. And so if you really are utterly and completely clueless, you're bound to know some friend who's a shooter and just say, hey, you know what? I just got this air rifle at, Cabela's. I got some pellets. Could you show me how to use it? Right. And so as long as you keep your head screwed on and you realize, don't set the target up against the fence in the backyard with the gaps in it where it's going to go through and kill the neighbor's cat or something, right? Yep. But I think if you have a relatively low powered, especially a pistol, you pump up or single break open, or they have CO2 powered ones, and you set up in your garage safely and learn how to shoot the gun, because you're going to learn manipulation skills, you're going to learn trigger press, you're going to learn sight picture, you're going to watch how all that affects the target. And if you decide you really like it, then you go back to Cabela's or big box store and you buy a dedicated, they have these little target systems, right?
Yeah.
So it safely captures, your pellets or your BBs or something. And be prepared, because it's going to open a whole new world for you. I started, like I said, with that $5 Daisy BB gun when I was a little kid and shooting cans in the backyard. And over the years, I've owned virtually every kind of high quality air rifle you could think of. My first one I was probably 25, and I bought what's called a Feinwerkbrau, which I think that's how you say that. Yeah, a German one. And, this was in the late 70s and it was $300. And so that was, I don't know what, $1,200 now.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a huge amount of money, but it was a called a break open. So you cocked it with the barrel and you put a pellet in, closed it, but it was very high precision. And that's what really showed me the value because, like you say, 25 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, you actually really can have effective accuracy. And this was a 177, and you could actually take small game like rabbits and things like that with it. So it just expands the whole world. People who are centerfire shooters or rimfire shooters may poo-poo air rifles. Oh, air rifles, why do you want to do that? Well, you want to do that because it's affordable, it's fun, they can be accurate or more accurate than a lot of, powder fired firearms.
Yeah.
I have an Air Force air gun, which is called a pre-charged pneumatic. And so what that means is that it has a little air tank. So you pump the air tank up to like 3,000 PSI. And I know this may be Greek if you're new to all this kind of stuff, but there's plenty of information. Dr. Google is your friend here. And so what it does is you use the pre-charged pneumatic, right? So you cock it, you put your pellet in, you close it. Mine happens to be a 25 caliber. That's like kind of almost a big bore air rifle, but it will shoot a 25 grain pellet, 30 grain pellet at close to 1,000 feet per second. And it will shoot it into a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch at 50 yards. And so, people who say, oh, they poo-poo air guns because they think BB gun.
Yeah.
And you and I both know, a BB gun is like shoots a pattern, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really shoot a group.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. We could probably go on for hours with this, but I think what my goal here is I wanted it to enthuse people and get them thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I know if you jump on Amazon and you do a search for affordable air pistols, you be prepared to be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so, and to me, as long as you stick to one of the name brands, you really can't hurt yourself.
Yeah. Well, that was the point I was going to make, that like with all firearms, the sky's the limit. And if you want to drop $5,000 on an air rifle, you can do it. But especially as a newer shooter or somebody that just wants to hone their skills, it's probably not necessary. I think probably the middle ground there is maybe $200 to $500. You can get really high quality guns at that price. But again, I don't even think you need that. I'd stay away from the $29.95 Daisy Red Ryder. I guess it'll teach a manual of arms, but that's probably a little too, shall we say, loose. But especially if you stick with pellet guns, because pellets are inherently more accurate than BBs. BBs fly well, but they fly every place. They're not the most accurate projectiles. So
they bounce a lot too, because they're steel.
They do, and they penetrate a lot. So you got to be careful there. But yeah, stick with a pellet rifle, and some of the lower price CO2 guns can be extremely accurate. Then you move up to piston guns, and the thing I've found with the sub, let's call them $100, maybe $150 ones, is they've got everything they need, except some of them have pretty lousy triggers. So when you get to the point that you're like, man, that trigger's not really, what I think I should be working with, then it may be time to look at a little bit better gun. And like I said, when they do, it's in the Olympics. There's lots of air rifle matches. You can start spending lots of money and then start getting one whole groups at incredible distances. But as we often say on this program, slow down, speed racer. Just get something you can go plink with in the backyard, practice your shooting position, your trigger control, sight alignment, all that stuff that is the foundation. And then when you finally realized I'm really getting a lot out of this, and I think my gun is limited to me, then it may be time to upgrade. But don't go hog wild out of the gate.
Well, I agree with you. I have a real high quality air pistol, and I keep it in my shop. And you've been in my shop. It's about 60 feet from corner to corner inside. Yeah. And so I have a little self-contained targeting system in there, and I keep a target on it, right? And so I keep the gun at the other end of the shop. And periodically, if I'm in the shop working or something like that, I just go over and shoot 3 or 4 or 5 shots at the target. And I just take my time, think about the sight picture, think about the trigger press, see where it's gone. I mean, it just kind of like gives you that little bit of exercise, gives you a chance to rest your brain for a minute. And there's there's no reason why you can't do that. And you can do that. Truly, if you go to Cabela's or Bass Pro or someplace and go where they have the air guns and just look around,
Yeah.
and they have single shots, and they have, like you say, for $100, you can get a Gamma or a Hatsun or one of those kind of things, and it'll be a rifle. It can be a pneumatic or CO2, or it could be a brake barrel. They do have, if they're CO2 powered or pre-charged pneumatic, they have some that have little magazines, so you can actually shoot it like a semi-auto if you want to. And they have pistols that are the same way. And so if you're allowed to shoot in your backyard, there's no reason that you can't set up a little mini combat course.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you want to run over there and engage that target, and run over there and engage that target. And plus, you know what? It is great fun for kids.
Oh yeah.
And it's a great way to teach them gun safety.
Yep. Well, one thing I would partway disagree with you is they are quieter than a powder firearm. But having said that, like that, I've got a 25 like you've got. They're
loud,
pretty saucy, and so you got to kind of be aware of that if you're shooting in an area where maybe projectile shooting firearms aren't allowed. First time you do it, and it's like, oh my, I think the neighbors heard that one.
My 25 caliber Air Force air gun, which is a very good quality gun. They're $500 to $700 depending on which model you get. But yeah, it sounds like a 22 when it goes off. Yeah. I even put a suppressor on it. They make air gun suppressors. Yep. But that's a target rifle and a hunting rifle, and that's kind of not, you don't go buy that first.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because if you want to learn how to shoot a handgun, you don't buy a $5,000 competition pistol as your first gun.
Yep.
You learn how to do it and learn if you want to do it or not, So, so that's what. So you need to think about that, and it's a lot of fun. And what we'll do is, I've made a list of manufacturers. There's another company called airgundepot.com. And they're kind of the go-to source online for many people who are aficionados, and they stock everything. And it's a good place for you to sort of start doing your research on air guns.
Yep. A couple points I want to make in the time we've got left is, and don't just think it's bolt action rifles or brake barrel cocking lever kind of actions and pistols. I've got a made by SIG. It's a full size replica of an AR-15, and I can't remember if it's full auto or semi-auto. It's a pre-charged pneumatic, which means it's got a little air tank, and you got to have a scuba tank or a high pressure compressor to power it up, but it weighs the same. The manual arms is the same. The reason I ended up with it is if you want to teach somebody how to manipulate the safety and run all the different switches, gears, and levers on an AR, this is a great way to do it because it's a 177 caliber pellet instead of a 223 round at 4,000 feet per second. So you've always, of course, got to be safe with your BB guns, your pellet guns, and all that. But still, the level of danger to other folks is a little bit reduced with that. But if you just looked at it from the side, you'd probably have a hard time telling that it wasn't actually a powder cartridge 223. So there's all kinds of stuff out there. But one of the things I want to get into, Roy, real quick, is there's a couple of things that folks may not realize, because I didn't realize, because I don't read the manual just like every other American male. And there's a few things that seem very intuitive about your higher end air rifles that may be surprising. And the first and probably the most important one is a safety message about if you're using a brake barrel piston air rifle, they've got very powerful springs. And if you somehow lose your grip or with some guns, you can pull the trigger before it's fully engaged. That barrel, and I've got a Benjamin, for example, and it's a solid steel barrel, just like a regular powder firearm. If that thing would come back at you powered by that spring, it'd knock you plumb out or into next week. So you got to be careful of that. And I never thought about it until somebody said, man, make sure that's away from your face. Like, why? And then they told me, I'm like, oh, well, I cheated death 2 or 3 times on that one. So that's one of those things. So anything you wanted to add to that, Roy?
Yeah, a common mistake is don't use petroleum-based lubricant on air guns.
Exactly.
You have to use a synthetic silicon-based lubricant because it'll rot all the little seals and stuff. Ask me how I know.
Yeah. Well, they'll also diesel, which is if the compression is high enough, if you've got oil vapor in there, just like a diesel engine, it'll explode, which generally won't hurt the firearm, but it makes it much louder, and it really hurts your accuracy. And I think it probably could if you did that every single shot. So
I remember that happened. Yeah, when I was a kid one time, we were just squirting WD-40 down or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It was crack. I thought, what the heck just happened? The other thing, and you touched on it briefly, is the fact that what's very fun about air guns is that they're allowed to be full auto.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have any special licenses or anything. So I was on Amazon not too long ago, and I bought a GI M2 carbine. Looks pretty good, actually. It was like $125.
Yeah.
Uses 2
heavy stock, and
it looks really cool. 2 CO2 cartridges in the butt. But what I like about it is that it has a bulk BB magazine, like a Daisy air rifle. Remember, you just fill it up, with 500, BBs. And so it has that. And then you just tilt it a certain way and pull this little slider out and push it back in, and that loads the magazine. Because a lot of these full auto ones and even semi-autos, you have to, load the magazine 1 BB at a time or something. It's a real pain in the neck. This isn't a pain in the neck. Anyway, so you can do semi-auto, full auto, and it has a safety. And at full auto, I think it's probably, 3,000 BBs a minute. It's about 4 times as fast as any machine gun you will ever shoot in your life. It's basically,
you can follow that stream of BBs down.
Yeah, it's like a garden hose, of BBs. Yeah, so
that's funny.
It's great fun. I chase grasshoppers around here with it, So I'm, a million years ago there was a gun writer, and I can't remember his name. He was a bit of a controversial guy. He wrote a lot about Africa and stuff like that.
Peter Hathaway Capstick.
Peter Hathaway Capstick, yeah. Regardless of what you think about Peter, in the late 60s, I think, or early 70s, he wrote a article called Backyard Safari. And it's legendary among shooters if you grew up in that period. Yeah. Not today, because they don't read magazines and they don't care about history. But and it just captured me. And he talks about stalking in the great grass, and all of the dangerous game that he goes after with his air gun. And it was just like, what fun,
Well, he wrote another one that was my favorite. He had, I think it was called The Avenger. And if you remember, Roy, they advertised this in the back of Guns and Ammo and probably the back of Guns magazine. And it used Freon cans, which we can't do now. But basically, you poured the BB in. Yeah. And he wrote a story about how he lived in a stilt house over the bay in Naples, Florida, and he would shoot what do you call them? Dragonflies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He named him DFB1 or something. It was Dragonfly, Blue, and it's a great story. But he talked about how, and this is one of the fun things with gun riders, he ordered one and it was a piece of junk. So he actually contacted the manufacturer, who happened to live in Florida. Next thing he knows, this guy shows up in his private plane, opens the attaché case, and he's like, here. And they're like, oh boy. And then it really, really got to be a lot of fun. But that story's still out there. I can't think of the exact name of it. But,
I remember it. Yeah, I ordered one of those, and it was a little bit on the expensive side for what it was. It was like $39.95 or something like that. But you could buy these little like miniature paint cans of Freon at the local auto parts place and it was like 99 cents or something like that. And so, because the ad had this guy who was like wearing a World War II helmet and it had a cigar in his mouth, right? And he was holding this, looked like a kind of like a grease gun kind of a thing. Oh Lord, that was so much fun. I agree with you. But they took all the good things away from us, so they can't do it with Freon anymore. But you can do all that kind of stuff. But now we use precharged pneumatics and things like that. And so, but open the door and think about it. I mean, really, if you want to, we joked about it, but get yourself a $25 or $35 Daisy, Red Ryder, it doesn't matter what, BB gun. Buy a container of BBs. And get yourself some plastic safety goggles, because as we said, those steel BBs bounce like a son of a gun. And go to your backyard and just kind of learn about it, shoot it a little bit. I mean, you can use the sights, and if you're like 10 feet away or something, they're pretty accurate. They more, at least for me, they can teach you how to point shoot really well, because when I shoot my BB gun, I tend to just sort of look over the sights down the barrel. And after a little while, you'll learn the trajectory of the, of the BBs, and you can lob one in at about 50 feet sometimes. So just do it. It's all fun.
Just do it.
And it's affordable,
it is.
And it's hard but careful. Wait, what did they say? You'll poke your eye out.
Yes, you will. Well, and one more thing I wanted to add, you might destroy an optic too. And this tends to be more a warning from years gone by than today, because build quality and materials are better. But an optic for an air gun is different than an optic for your powder firearms. You would think a scope that can handle the recoil of a .458 Winchester Magnum should be able to handle your .177 Daisy, but all the experts tell me that there's a significantly different recoil impulse, and actually the air rifle is more punishing. So I've always taken that as gospel. So if you're going to put something on your new air rifle, make sure that it's capable of handling the recoil impulse of air, because it's different. And I've not personally seen that, but I've had enough experts tell me that I'm willing to trust that that's true. So I always look for a air rifle optic when I'm mounting one. So
you need that on spring powered, the brake barrel ones, because it actually recoils forward.
Right.
When you release it, it goes boom. So normal scopes are set up for recoil in the other direction. And you'll notice usually on the dedicated air guns ring and mount systems, there's usually a bit of a flange or a dovetail or something that locks the ring in so it can't move forward and backwards, because of that. Because of that. So, hey, and you brought up something, that AR-15. I wanted to remind people that there's a wide cross section of really high quality replica air guns. 1911s and Lugers, and I mean, they look really good. And a lot of them manipulate just exactly like a gun. So that's another inexpensive way for you to to train and have some fun. The other thing that I think we need to mention, though, is that it's not just air guns, it's airsoft too. And, and maybe paintballs, although to me that's entirely different. That's just like a game thing that you go, but airsoft can be really, really fun. I mean, because they make some really high quality, good looking airsoft pistols, and the ammo's cheap. It's little plastic pellets. They're safe to shoot in the garage. And, so that's another way, maybe get yourself a little airsoft pistol, $35, hang up a paper target in a box in your garage and just start having some fun.
I'm going to say, and this statement has not been vetted through the legal department of the Guns Podcast US, but I've heard of a certain group that was tactical in nature, might have used a whole series of very authentic AR-15s in Airsoft for force-on-force training, because they sting, but they don't necessarily harm you. So I'm not saying do that. I'm not saying it's safe or legal or ethical, moral, or whatever, but Airsoft has been used by other groups in the past for pretty good close-in force-on-force training. So, but I'm not.
What was that bullet? We used to use those guns and that simunitions.
Simunitions, yeah.
Munitions, yeah. Now that's not Airsoft, boys and girls.
Right.
But
Airsoft is plastic BBs, basically.
Yeah, you can look this up, but basically you could do a conversion and you would shoot it in your duty pistol. And we used to, you'd wear eye protection and a little light body armor kind of, and then so you would actually have shootouts with each other.
Yeah.
And they were colored pellets, and so it was like blue and red.
Yep.
So the other guy, the good guys were blue and the bad guys were red or something. It would leave a mark on you. So yeah, I forgot about that. But that, if the professionals use those kind of things, though, that tells you that there is some value and some credibility to it. And so just don't be overwhelmed by it. And just go to Walmart or someplace and go to that department and you'll see a bunch of these guns. Look at one that's in your budget. Chances are pretty good if it's for sale there, it's going to be good enough for what you need.
Yeah.
It's going to be CO2, or it's going to be some kind of a little pump up one, right? Or it's going to be a brake barrel, it's called. Any of those work. CO2, you have to buy CO2 cartridges, which adds a little bit of an expense. And so don't overthink it. So you'll walk out of there with a handgun in a box, a container full of whatever it's shooting, BBs or pellets or whatever, your eye protection. Maybe if you want to splurge, get one of the little target containment systems. They're not a lot of money. Yeah. I mean, do you agree? I mean, really, for $150, you could probably come out of there pretty much good to go.
Yep, exactly. And you can use it in your backyard and practice all those fundamentals that we keep hammering on. That's the real basis of being that high speed, low drag, tier 1 operator that many people on the internet claim to be. So
plus, when you go to work Monday, you can sit there and smugly say, yeah, I was shooting over the weekend in my garage.
Yeah.
And people are going to go,
exactly.
What?
How did you do that? Are you crazy?
Are you crazy? Yeah.
So speaking of high speed, low drag, we've come to, as I teased before, we were talking about this before we got started. I said, we need to talk about this. We've threatened to in the past and we've done it a few times, but comments. And Roy I am so grateful that Roy rides herd on our comments. I try to, and there's just other stuff going on, but Roy really follows those. And you've got one that talks about we're low speed and something.
Oh, it's a great. How it works is with YouTube, right? Okay, they watch the video, whatever it is, one of my shooting videos or a podcast or something like that. And then we encourage comments. And the vast majority are really nice people, and I would consider them friends and, even extended family. But they can be really funny sometimes.
Yeah.
These people are thinkers. And so we were talking about Fudds and, we're lethal Fudds and all that kind of stuff. And the guy said, yeah, I'm a Fudd. I'm low speed, high drag.
Exactly.
I mean, is that a t-shirt or is that a t-shirt?
It may be soon, because I just think that kind of embraces, and there's the old Toby Keith song, I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. And I like to think that, so
that's kind of I can see it. I'm proud to be a Fudd, low speed, high drag or something.
Absolutely.
And then we were talking about, I think it was the last podcast we were talking about, don't just go to the range and do a mag dump.
Yeah.
Right. And so this guy made a comment. It was really funny. And he was talking about, he said, I see it all the time. They've got their, modular pistols and their ARs with everything hung on them and all. And then he said, sometimes I feel like I'm surrounded by toddlers who just received their first Mr. Potato Head combo set. Now, if you have to ask what a Mr. Potato Head is, then you're
not a Fudd.
You're not a certified, Fudd, as it were.
Wow, that's pretty funny.
That's hysterical, isn't it? Because you remember Mr. Potato Head.
Oh, yeah.
Build them up in each one. If you saw, what was that? Woody
Toy Story.
Toy Story. Yeah, they had a Mr. Potato Head and Mrs. Potato Head or something. But another guy had a really good comment. I think it was we were on doing a podcast about are revolvers still valid? We've covered that several times. And we say, yes, they are, of course. And so this guy says, I always teach my concealed carry students both revolver and automatic, which is good. He says, I hold up a revolver and say, this is writing in cursive, which I think is great. I don't know why, but I love that. Yeah. He says, then I hold up a Glock and I say, this is texting with autocorrect. And he said, one will teach you and one will spoil you. Yeah, right? But
funny.
It's like, I love that.
Yeah.
It's writing in cursive. That's a t-shirt right there. Picture revolver. writing in cursive, Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm going to have to get busy with the graphics team and come up with some new shirts. So
like a picture of a dial telephone.
Yeah.
And then say, if you know what this is, and then underneath it, a picture of a revolver. Yeah. And then says, then you know what this is for.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, great stuff. Well, that's a perfect segue into, we want to hear what you've got to say. As Roy said, if you're watching us on YouTube, leave a comment, and I check them occasionally, but Roy checks them religiously. And again, I thank him for that. So leave us a comment what you think. And it seems like we say this every episode now, but if you intentionally say, well, you're just Fudds, why waste your time? That's not new territory we're covering here, kids. Okay. But for those of you who are Fudds, and proudly so, and hopefully we're all lethal Fudds, and beware of the old guy sitting in the corner in the overalls, because if he's a shooter, he probably can shoot well. So I've always embraced that.
I want to interject something here.
Okay.
I think we need to change that term to Yosemite Sam.
Okay.
So from now on, and you start calling us, you guys are just Yosemite Sams. It's like, absolutely. You young
the mustache.
Yep.
Yeah. Brace yourself. We're under arms. So
that's right. Great.
Well, anyway, leave us a comment on YouTube, or you can reach out to us if you're listening on the audio podcast. Of course, that's editor@gunspodcast.us. And our website is, of course, gunspodcast.us. There's lots of good stuff there. There's some of my other writings and random brain drippings and just fun stuff. And you can buy merch there, too. We've got some T-shirts and coffee mugs. And I think we're probably going to have some other T-shirts soon. So don't go there looking for the lethal Fudd yet, but I think that's going to be in the near future. But also, of course, our partner in crime is gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you go there. Both of us have written there. I was the editor there, and there's lots more gun goodness. I doubt if you've read all the thousands of articles that are at Guns Magazine. Plus, we post new stuff all the time. This week, my story, the Remora holsters. Roy, we were going to talk offline about those. Those were kind of cool. So I wrote a story, and you can see it at gunsmagazine.com. And as I say, go sign up for the newsletters, get all this great gun goodness, including our podcast, delivered directly to your inbox. So visit gunspodcast.us, gunsmagazine.com, leave Roy a comment, make him chuckle, and you might appear on an upcoming episode of the Guns Podcast US. So, Roy, anything you want to share before we get out of here?
Just go do it.
Go do it.
Go buy an air gun and start having some fun, especially if you've got kids.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. And what is it we say? I said this like on the second episode, and it was a throwaway quip, and then it kind of became a tagline for me of gun and fun are only one letter apart. And that's something I think we all agree that we tend to get a little too wrapped around the axle nowadays, especially maybe a different generation of shooters than us. Guns are supposed to be enjoyable and fun, at least in the recreational side. I get there's a very serious purpose because Roy and I have done that side of it. But for the shooting and the enjoyment and the collecting and the talking about, go have some fun. So get you that air rifle and get out there. And I almost ended the podcast, didn't I? Wow. So, okay, we will end the podcast on that. I'm your host, Brent Wheat, and of course, joined by Roy Huntington. And as we say at the end of every podcast, and especially this one, go get that air rifle. And now just get out there and get shooting.